Welcome to Stubs with Jason. S-T-U-B-S spells Stubs. S-T-U-B-S spells Stubs. Stubs. Hey people, welcome to Stubs with Jason, where I discuss movies, music, TV, pretty much all kinds of things on all kinds of screens. This week I saw Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It is the fourth entry in the modern Planet of the Apes series. I suppose you could go into this movie without seeing any of the previous entries, but it is a bit of a continuation of that last trilogy. The trilogy that started with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, followed by 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and concluded with 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes. And with that said, you don't need to have seen any of the classic Planet of the Apes movies or Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes movie. Although, again, there's, little Easter eggs that I'm sure make that a little better if you appreciated those. You probably find just a little more out of the modern, but definitely not required viewing. This new movie picks up a few generations after the conclusion from War for the Planet of the Apes, but it's got a whole new set of characters. I would say, overall this movie starts off a little slow. The conflict doesn't jump out and present itself immediately. Instead, we take time to meet those new characters. Noah is a young ape growing up in what's called Eagle Clan. His father, Koro, is the elder of that clan, and Dar is his mother. And then we also meet a pair of Noah's friends as well. We really get to see a sense of community and the evolution that's occurred, though, from the end of the last movie to this new one in terms of their society. They're all walking upright. They're speaking fluent English at this point. They do a little bit of sign language, but not much. They have traditions, and you can see they've built their village up. It's all pretty cool. So, and I understand why they took this approach. As Noah kind of goes through the adventures and situations that he's going to be faced with, they're just giving you a little bit of what would be at stake in Noah's mind as he's making decisions moving forward. It doesn't take long for things to take a turn for Eagle Clan. Eventually, we encounter an invading force that is there to kind of disrupt their harmony. From there, Noah finds himself on a bit of a hero's journey. Along that journey, he encounters an orangutan named Raka, performed by a guy named Peter Macon. Peter doesn't appear to have much on his IMDb in terms of major motion picture roles, but he has a ton of voice work. I think he's just fantastic. He's probably my favorite character in the movie. He's kind of an intellectual, like a Yoda character almost. He challenges Noah's understanding of many things. They just have great interactions. I think he's just a delight when he's on screen. Eventually, we encounter our primary human character in the movie, portrayed by Freya Allen. They keep continuing on and eventually meet King Proximus Caesar. And he is portrayed by Kevin Durand, who you may remember me from mentioning in this year's Abigail. And if you don't remember that, don't beat yourself up. It's all right. If you already forgot about 2024's Abigail, it's pretty easy to do after it leaves your site for 5 minutes. So, yeah. I got a little more to talk about, though, as far as Kevin Durand goes here in a little bit. So, with that said, again, in this movie, just like in Abigail, I think he is one of the standout performances. He's extremely charismatic. Clearly understands the role. I think he and Raka feel like complete three-dimensional characters, as well as Noah. And, I think that kind of helps him stand out a little more. It's not that there's anything particularly wrong with everyone else, but these three they definitely stand out a bit. So I think everyone else is fine or okay, and then they just kind of, do their thing with the ape model, motion tracked or performance captured on top of that. So speaking of those captures, the visual effects are solid, more than passable. There's a couple of great kind of wide shots that are wonderful to look at, good environments. The ape models are really nice, and it looks good, but I do think it's just a slight step down from the work that we got, from the VFX that we got on Dawn and War. I just think those are still breathtaking in terms of the performance capturing, in the models. In this movie, they're all just pretty good. Again, aside from Proximus, Raka, and Noah, who are really great, but I think a lot of that might come down to having a guy like Andy Serkis on the set to establish a tone with his performance capture. So in that last trilogy, you had Andy Serkis, who obviously is best known for being Gollum in Lord of the Rings. He provided the performance for Caesar, and I think that he probably, again, like I said, just set a tone that got everybody else to a new level. And I just don't think that they quite get to that level. But again, it's still really good and really enjoyable. This might sound kind of crazy, but like in the last trilogy of these movies, I feel like when you had shots of Caesar's face, and it started in on his eyes, I felt like I was looking at something, and you could see the wheels kind of turning just in the resting expression that's there. And in this movie, it looks good, but I just don't get that sense of that. Like, it just looks like, oh yeah, you've got a really good model and you've slapped it on top of this, performance capture. So again, that's a really nitpicky thing to come out, to say, I think. And honestly, I would say 90% of the people who will ever listen to this, will be like, this guy's just kind of crazy. That's just how I took it. Anyways, as you meet some of these characters, some of their encounters lead to the movie's only few moments of humor, as well as also leading to the few twists that it has to offer as far as, just surprises that it drops on you, right? So I don't think either of those things are earth-shattering in this movie. They don't feel cheap. They're not like disposable and throwaway. They're just fine. A lot of stuff in this movie is pretty good or fine, right? So after you get through the second act, I'd say you have a pretty clear understanding of what Noah's purpose is, but he just has a little more to consider than he did before. There's just people have thrown more at him, so it's, again, interesting to see what's your hero going to do when he's got to make these tough choices, right? So after you get through all that, and with all that, you kind of move your way to and through what I would call a pretty satisfying third act. I'm not going to get into the details of it. It's action, there's set it looks good. It's, entertaining and fun. It's solid. It's all solid. I think the story's good. They could have easily just thrown a Caesar clone at us, but Noah's definitely his own character, still trying to figure things out. His priorities are still being worked out, and eventually he finds himself in the middle of conflicting forces that I just don't think he truly understands until he goes through the events of this movie. This movie asks a very deliberate question that is seemingly setting the tone for what's to come. I'll definitely be back because I want to see where they go. Although I gotta say, I kind of feel like there's this potential for us to just slide right back into the trilogy that we just got, and I'm hoping that they can avoid that. I'd like to see things move forward, I'd like to see the apes continue to evolve and move forward. I don't know if they're going to be bold enough to jump out in time again. I kind of hope that they do. Anyways, I don't want to get too deep into that. All right, so overall, I give this movie a 7.8 out of 10. I think it's just a little below the trilogy that we had got over the last decade or so. I do like that it's set in the same universe. It's not a full-on reboot. They could have just tossed all that out and just gone from scratch if they wanted to, or just literally remade those again if they wanted to. And I think this movie is a great jumping off point to see where we can go from here. So with that in mind, with that said though, good thing though, this movie doesn't constantly spend time setting up the future. The things that do that are kind of backloaded in the movie and they kind of fit naturally. It doesn't feel like you're just watching a trailer for future installments of the Planet of the Apes saga. So In terms of the modern Apes movies, I think I'd put this in fourth place. I still think Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is the best. Rise of the Planet of the Apes is probably second. And War for the Planet of the Apes is third. And this comes in at fourth. Now, I think that there's a huge gap between Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and the rest of these movies. But I think the other three are pretty close. And they're all, again, really good. And I think the only reason I probably have Rise so high is it was just so surprising. I had no idea. I thought it might be good. I did not think it was going to be great. And it is really great. So, along with that 7.8, I'd say go see this in the theaters. You know, while I don't think, as far as a cinematography standpoint, there's anything that demands to be seen on a big screen, this thing is definitely going to be acceptable if you can't make it and you have to watch it at home. It's a good movie, and you should go check it out. You'll probably really enjoy it, especially if you've already been in on the rest of this series. Go check it out, and you'll really enjoy it. No post-credits or mid-credits or anything like that. I don't think these movies are made with young kids in mind. I don't think there's anything you need to particularly worry about showing a kid this movie, but I would just think that they probably get bored. I think this is a little more cerebral than your average blockbuster. You know, Godzilla and Kong, you know, I get it. Yeah, that sometimes just literally the presence of an animal like that can keep a kid's attention. But Kong's kind of running around doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I mean, and they're moving, but I mean, there's a lot of time in this movie where like they're just riding on horses and talking, and they just kind of set up camp and they talk, you know, like there's definitely action bits I'm not talking about, right? But I don't know. I just don't think that this is for young kids. You know, with that in mind, this was the movie that my 14-year-old was most excited to see this summer. And he thankfully came out and he said, yeah, this was really good. It was pretty good. He was very happy with what he had seen. I had a cousin who went with us as well. He came out saying it was the best of the entire franchise. He really enjoyed that it focused on just the apes and their story. The entire movie, or pretty much the entire story, the entire movie is through an ape's perspective. The previous trilogy definitely had storylines dedicated to human characters that you spend time with, away from the apes. Rise is a human story where Caesar's just kind of there. That's the secondary story. I mean, Caesar has his own screen time, but a lot of that first movie is spent with human characters. So yeah, this movie definitely focuses on Noah and his group and the people that he encounters and his actions. Definitely a Planet of the Apes movie about the apes. With that in mind, though, you know, the longer he and I talked about it, I feel like he started to come down a little bit on it. Not necessarily like come down harshly on it. It was more so of, I think he just was reflecting a little more on some of the elements that were there, and they weren't holding up as much as it was just even that little bit of time. And, you know, I don't know if you guys do that, but I just find myself fighting that urge all the time. You walk out of a movie that you really enjoyed, you're like, oh, that was amazing, right? And then, you know, 2 days later, you find yourself like, was that really amazing? This recording, by the way, has happened now a few days after I've seen the movie, so I've had some time to bake on it, and I still feel pretty solid on where I landed with it at that point in time. So, all right, like I said, 7.8. I think it's really good. I wouldn't say can't miss, but you should definitely check it out. And I encourage you to check out this and the rest of the series if you haven't done so already, or the modern series at least. I don't think you'll regret seeing this movie in the theater, but I also don't think it's the end of the world if you watch it at home. If you're in on these, go check it out. If you do go, you don't need to go to an Ultra Screen or an IMAX. I mean, if you love those premium formats, then go for it. But there's just nothing really here that has to be seen that way. So you might be thinking my 7.8 seems a little low for a movie that I didn't really pick apart here. I think that's fair. If I wanted to boil my critiques down, I think it's a bit slow at the beginning. It doesn't have pacing problems. It just, most of the interesting elements in this movie don't really get introduced till about halfway through the film, maybe a little sooner than that. So I didn't feel like I had a ton to chew on while we were going through some things, but I was still entertained by what they were giving me. So I think another thing is, like, at the end of the day, Noah is a less compelling character than Caesar. Is that even a fair gripe to have? Maybe not, but I think if you're going to plant your flag in an existing property, you're immediately saying, I'm worthy of being here. And it's not that he's not a bad character. I think he just comes a little short at this point. But that's fine, because on the other hand, there's still potential. This is just the first entry. So, again, think about it. Like, when we all watched the Star Wars sequel trilogy, who did you measure Kylo Ren up against? Darth Vader and Darth Maul and all of the other Sith that we had already been introduced to. Like, maybe you guys don't do that. I do. I'm constantly comparing and contrasting entries and all of that stuff, and hence why I'm here doing this, right? Anyway. I would say my final gripe is that at the end of the day, this movie is kind of cookie cutter. Like, the broad strokes of the narrative aren't very complicated. I think the ancillary implications are a little more interesting, but the story we're focused on here isn't really mixing things up too much. So, I mean, like, cookie cutter, this is a wonderful, warm chocolate chip cookie that is just tasty, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But the last three movies are like super premium peanut butter, white macadamia nut cookies. Like, they are just a little more of a fancier, more tasty cookie, in my opinion. Sorry if y'all got the snackies now, but that was the best analogy I could come up with at the moment. So, with all that in mind, you probably felt I referenced the last three movies a lot here. I gotta say, leading up to Kingdom, me and the boy watched Rise, Dawn, and War over the last couple of months. It was his first time watching them. He really wanted to see him after seeing this the trailer for this movie, and he really loved that trilogy. And I gotta say, they really hold up. Dawn is 10 years old. I still think it's a masterpiece. I remember 2014's movie slate was so stacked, and when I watched it, I was in Chicago for Godzilla Fest, and I couldn't believe how good it was. I kind of felt guilty. I remember walking out being like, here I'm in Chicago celebrating this wonderful Godzilla movie that I've waited my whole life for, and it's been like a month, and I'm like, well, I just saw a movie that was better than that Godzilla movie. Dang. But it is. To me, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is the best movie of 2014. So, with that in mind, I just because I hold those three in such high regard, they are the bar that I measured this movie against. And I think we've just taken a small step backwards. But again, I think that's okay. Like, if you start turned all the way up to 11, where do you go from there, right? Like, you're not going to get to a level 50. You're not going to get to 20, right? Like, if you push that thing to bust, then there's nowhere to go. So I think it's a great entry. It's a great start. It's a good place for this new era to begin. I was just reading today, they say they've got plans for 9 movies, which I think is a bit much. But again, if they're all going to be good to solid, maybe even great, that's fine. Then we'll take them, right? So that's the last I have. 7.8. Go watch Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So, all right, circling back around to a note that I had earlier regarding the cast, specifically Kevin Durand. My guy has been in a lot more than I realized. Like, I got to take a moment to run through some of his IMDb. And keep in mind, a lot of these are bit parts, but still. Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, Scooby-Doo 2, ER, Stargate SG-1, Dark Angel, Walking Tall, CSI, Smoking Aces, 310 to Yuma, CSI Miami, Russell Crowe's Robin Hood, Family Guy, Resident Evil Retribution, Noah, Vikings, American Dad, The Strain, Voltron, Modern Swamp Thing, Ballers. He also had a little role in Lost. And then, as previously mentioned, Abigail is where he recently jumped out to me, but not on that list are the 2 biggest roles that he's had prior to this movie. He was the Blob in X-Men Origins Wolverine. Yeah, I know, a terrible movie. And the Blob sequence is just out of control. But I think he's a really good choice for Blob. Even with all the crazy special effects they did on it, I thought that worked. And I think that he has the right vibe / energy for that character. So the other movie that he's in is a movie I think that is really underappreciated, and that's Real Steel. He plays the heel in Real Steel, and he's awesome in it. It's great. Real Steel, for those who don't know, probably on Disney Plus, is your standard reluctant adult / master taking on the unwanted sidekick / Padawan, but with fighting robots. And it's got heart, and maybe a sentient robot that's constantly watching all of us and all the main characters as they live their life. We don't really know. They don't specifically tell you that answer. They kind of allude to it, though. So, before I get out of here, I want to try something new. We're going to try a new segment that I'm going to call Nerd News. All right. In our first Nerd News segment, last week, we got our first look at the brand new Superman from James Gunn's Superman Legacy. I threw a picture up of it on the Stubs with Jason Facebook page. I don't know. It's just a picture, but with that in mind, as I look at it, Superman does not look like he's in much of a hurry to take care of that really bad situation going on in the background. It's like, dude, buddy, cheer up and get out there and just give it your best. We need you, Soups. We need you. So, I was talking to my buddy about this, and he was like, Superman just looks disappointed. Like, he wants to pull the Mr. Incredible card and say, like, I feel like the maid. I just clean this up. Can we keep it clean for 10 minutes? The other thing is, like, Superman's putting his shoes on here. And it's like, Superman's pretty famous for always having his costume on, right? Superman jumping in and out of a phone booth is like the most basic Superman thing. I don't know. I mean, he's pretty famous for that, right? But we're suiting up now, so okay. Yeah. Also, I noticed in the background, pink beams. Pink beam destroying whatever, probably. I'm going to call it now. Pink beams are the new blue sky beams of doom of this decade. So, just saying, where you had all those blue beams of death and destruction before, in all those different movies, not the case anymore. Moving forward, pink sky beam of dooms. Spoiler alert, Godzilla and Kong does have a pink sky beam. It's not so much of doom, it's Godzilla's atomic breath, but still, if we're going to kick off trends that are going to last a decade, I just want to make sure the big guy gets his proper due. So, look, here's what the Godzilla fans are a bit dicey, okay? We're a dicey bunch, okay? We've had decades of ridicule, okay? Nobody respected us. We were all the laughing stock of the internet, okay? And with the recent run of success we've had, I mean, Godzilla won an Oscar. Godzilla X Kong is crushing at the box office. You should go see it if you haven't seen it. Why not? It's going to leave. It's coming out on digital. If you haven't watched it yet, you can watch it at home now. Take that breeze of ridiculousness then and just have a good time. Just have a great, just under 2 hours, I would say. Have a blast. Anyway, I don't encourage you to engage with Godzilla fans on social media. If you see a Godzilla post, just keep moving. You don't want to engage on that. You don't want to stir those fans. Those people are angry. Those people get touchy about very weird things, I've noticed. How are you going to know that they're one of those Godzilla fans? You'll know. Trust me. They're not going to be shy. They're going to let you know. Okay. Back to the pink beam of doom. Something I noticed. I just want to paraphrase Baron Zemo and just say, Captain, I noticed a bit of green in your pink laser beam of death in the sky. Oof. Terrible accent. I got to stop doing those impressions. They are all bad. Anyway, that green around the pink death laser, guys, probably means we got some Green Lantern action going on in the third act. Oh, I'm ready for that. That'll be cool. Soup's out there fighting with Green Lantern, really getting to see a couple of cosmic style powers do something together. I'm ready for it. I don't know. we'll see. All of that said, I think the suit looks good. I want that movie to be good. I love Man of Steel. I know some people don't, but as much as I don't love Superman, I do want to love Superman movies. I hope that there's good Superman movies. I think that everything is better when we have good Superman movies. In other nerd news, John Malkovich got cast in Fantastic Four in an undisclosed role. That's cool. I'll take that. They also announced their Galactus. It's going to be a guy named Ralph Ineson. He's been in Harry Potter, Game of Thrones. He was in that Gunpowder Milkshake I talked about. All kinds of stuff. If you guys saw this, if you see him, you're going to know who he is. Not that I think we're going to see him, because it's probably just going to be, I don't know, who knows what they're going to do. Anyway, someone definitely reminded me, though, he was also in a show called The IT Crowd, and he gives a massage, and then he kind of kisses a guy on his bum, and it turns into a whole thing. And now we gotta live with the fact that Galactus is the bum kisser. So I don't know. I also think it's really bold that Marvel is going with Galactus and Silver Surfer in this first go, but I know that they feel a lot of pressure. Like they know they have to crush this Fantastic Four movie. I was just talking to somebody this weekend who I was like, what will it take for you to come back to Marvel and be in on Marvel? And they're like, it's got to be a Fantastic Four movie. They got to crush that. So I know that's just one person, but I'm fairly certain there's a lot of people who share that sentiment out there at this point in time. So we also got confirmation that they're going to officially do an Office spinoff series set in the same world as the Michael Scott, Steve Carell world, universe, series, whatever you want to call that. Apparently, the documentary team is going to be observing a dying Midwest newspaper. That could be fun. I just hope that this doesn't turn into a bunch of recycled Office jokes where the reference is that print media is the thing that's dying instead of paper. I don't need Dwight 2.0 out there making jokes about not trusting the internet because it's going to kill him, So the only casting I've heard about this show is Domhnall Gleeson, who I think is probably best known for being General Hux in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. If you're not sure who I'm talking about still, he was the angry ginger that shouted a lot in The Force Awakens. He was also in a movie I've mentioned before called Ex Machina. If you haven't watched Ex Machina, do yourself a favor, go watch Ex Machina. It's super solid. Anyways, back to this Office show. Greg Daniels is still on as a producer and listed as one of the co-creators. So as much as I want to say, you guys should just run away. You're just going to mess this up. You're going to tarnish one of the best sitcoms that's ever been made. I'm going to have a little bit of hope because Greg Daniels really delivers. He delivered The Office. He did Parks and Rec, King of the Hill. He wrote on Seinfeld, SNL. He did The Simpsons. Again, you listen to that run, that's a good enough resume for me. So if he thinks that this thing is worthwhile, I'm probably going to be willing to at least give it a shot. I really hope it's good. I know fans out there are really hungry. The Office fan base is just huge. It's crazy how a show can find such a second level of popularity after its run, but this is how it works. This is what syndication did back when we were kids, right? Remember watching all the double episodes of The Simpsons every day? You had like Mad About You and Friends, and Frasier was on there, and all the different things that cycled, and eventually it went to 2.5 Men. I remember, again, you just kind of, those shows became part of your everyday, right? And it is interesting how it's still the same thing. People just do it on streaming instead of watching, their locals. So it's funny how that works. All right, I expect that show to drop next year. Probably, it is definitely coming to Peacock. So, speaking of Peacock, they were developing a Friday the 13th prequel series called Crystal Lake with A24 Studios. It was being written and developed by Brian Fuller, who did the Hannibal series. That's another one. You should definitely check it out. Anyways, that was until he dropped the following on his social media. For reasons beyond our control, A24 has elected to go a different direction with the material. We hope the final product will be something that Friday the 13th fans all over the world will enjoy. I'll be the first to admit, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all of them. The whole 80s slasher thing, all of that. None of it does anything for me. Like, that, they just don't do anything for me. Oddly enough, I do enjoy the Halloween movies. I mean, the good Halloween movies, and I know that's a real mixed bag. But yeah, so with that in mind, I think A24 and Brian Fuller being behind this thing kind of had me excited, and I was like, yeah, this could be great, because I really loved that Hannibal series. Unless they find just a home run of a replacement showrunner for this, I probably won't really. Someone's going to have to come to me and just really sell it, and it's just going to have to be amazing, because, yeah, I think that all of these are pretty limited. So, I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, that's probably enough nerd news. I mean, you guys are probably done with hearing my voice this week. If you didn't see on my Stubs page, I did get to go see a preview movie the other night. It was definitely not what I was expecting, but I've already got some stuff together for that, and if I'm lucky, if I have the time, I'm going to try and do a double drop, so you might get another episode by the end of the week. And who doesn't want that? I mean, I don't know if I want that. No, it's still great, still having a blast doing this. If you're, listening, thank you so much for listening. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you're at, give this thing a follow, give me a like. If you don't mind sharing on your Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on, share it there, share it with your friends, share it with your family, get it out there. Any chance you get, just keep spreading the love, right? So, like I said, I do appreciate all you guys taking the time listening when you do. I love the feedback you guys all give me. Special shout out to my dude, Jack Lind, #1 soldier out there, spreading the good word. You are my #1 guy. All right, guys, have a great one. Till next time. Stubs all done.